President of the Parliament, distinguished speakers, dear friends, what can I say after these extraordinary speeches and presentations but amen, and let's go and do it. After the reception, go home and move this forward into an extraordinary global journey. I was reflecting, sitting here, listening to these great presentations, that it was in October of last year that President Hollande of France stood exactly in the same steps in this hall, 6 weeks before the Paris conference started, where he had been invited by us to come and present the keynote speech at the Arctic Circle Assembly. His major presentation, where he connected the future of the ice-covered world, the survival of the planet, and the urgent need for a comprehensive energy global transformation. It was indeed an extraordinary political statement for the President of France to come straight from a European Union summit to this country to put his reputation on the line, to demonstrate not only his own personal commitment, but the commitment of France to the success of this effort. And he had 2 hours before he came and spoke in this very hall. So we took him to our most aggressively receding glacier, Sólheimajökull in Icelandic, which means the glacier of the world of the sun. And although it was a pretty tough day, cold and rainy, we decided to land the helicopter not at the edge of the glacier as it is today, but to land the helicopter where the glacier was when I was born. And despite the weather and the rocky terrain and the slippery stones, we made the President of France walk the distance for over half an hour, almost 45 minutes, from the place where the glacier was when I was born to where it is now. In the beginning, his staff wanted to hand him umbrellas because it was raining and cold. But of course, that wouldn't look very good in France. So we decided to walk the distance. And it was quite extraordinary to witness that as we progressed, he personally, for the first time, experienced what aggressive climate change is really about. Never before in his entire career had he up front had literally to walk the climate walk in that way. And when we came to the edge of the glacier, of course, he witnessed, like everybody else, the aggressive melting, the drops falling, the lake getting bigger. And he also saw the people who were there in this black wilderness, having come from Australia, from Africa, from the United States and elsewhere, and were there by coincidence, because they also wanted to witness climate change up front. And then he came here to this hall and made what his people told me, and I think everybody who was there could agree, was for him an extraordinary emotional speech, where his personal commitment to the success of the Paris negotiations almost became the core of his international political being. And then, of course, as we all know, the success of Paris was, in fact, extraordinary. It was a global landmark in the history of the planet. And this photograph of him and Christina Figueres and Ban Ki-moon and others will forever be in the memory of mankind as one of these rare historic moments when the people of the planet come together in a success. There are not many such moments, but that was indeed one of them. And as my good friend Amin just described, the commitment of the Energy Secretary of France, Royal, to bringing the geothermal experience, not just of Iceland, but also other countries, into the forefront of the energy transformation in the follow-up of the Paris success, was also one of the major contributions that the two of them and the government of France made to this success. And as we discussed both yesterday and earlier today, for those of us who have campaigned for a transformation of the world with respect to collective action to prevent irreversible climate change, the Paris meeting was an historic transition, which we perhaps thought we would never see, but it has happened. And the momentum that it gives us is extraordinary, especially since everybody there acknowledged that the other side of the climate coin was a new type of aggressive clean energy global cooperation, with the emphasis on aggressive. That is why we came together in such a short time, now 40 countries, and launched the Global Geothermal Alliance. When I was growing up in this country, we were still, with respect to our geothermal transformation, just putting pipes in mud streets to bring hot water into one street after another. Most of the country had no experience of geothermal urban heating. Geothermal power plants in the country producing electricity didn't exist until a number of decades later. The greenhouse sector, of course, was also absent from our scene. We imported tomatoes for a limited time of the year. And those who had perhaps small greenhouses, either on the farms or in the house, were considered to be eccentrics and not a part of the Icelandic mainstream. And even the Blue Lagoon, which now the National Geographic has chosen as one of the 25 most remarkable places on planet Earth, is so young that it was in the first years of my presidency that I inaugurated the present Blue Lagoon. So when my good friend Professor Porter comes here and urges us in an extraordinary presentation to take the geothermal global in a way that all of us would have thought impossible just a few years ago, not to talk about the early times when pipes in the mud street was the only thing we were doing, is to some extent, my good friends, like Paris, an historical transformation with respect to the geothermal industry. What this conference has done in these 2 days is that in addition to Professor Porter's presentation, being, as we all know, the leading intellectual on business transformation on the planet, this meeting has also brought to us the two leading international officials in the field of clean energy transformation. Director General Amin of IRENA, the new international institutions which the UN has given the mandate to transform the world in terms of clean energy, and Rachel Kite, who a few months ago took over the Sustainable Energy for All, the other side of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's commitment to, on the one hand, fighting the climate change, and on the other, bringing clean energy to every part of the planet, to every citizen on this planet. For a small country like Iceland, their presence here at this conference of these three people is, of course, a great honor, and I thank them for being here with us. But I think for the global geothermal sector, that is also a very important historic shift. Because what they have told us, the three of them together, is that on the one hand, the geothermal transformation has moved up front to the battle line of the global clean energy transformation. And with Professor Porter telling us that it will give all of us, every country that joins this journey, an extraordinary business opportunity and prosperity. That at the same time, we can save the planet and bring prosperity and economic progress to our people. And for me personally, we started a long time ago this geothermal mission. It is a very moving occasion to seeing all of you here and seeing these three global leaders in their respective field urging us to link our forces to make this a success. And it is doable. It is doable. And the reason why I say that is the example of what we have done with China. In 2002, when Jiang Zemin, who was then president of China, we now have another president, of course, and another president who was between Jiang Zemin and Xi Jinping. But when Jiang Zemin came to Iceland in 2002, I took him to what was then our most advanced geothermal power plant. And it was the first time in the 5,000 years history of China that the leaders of that country had ever been to a geothermal power plant. And they became absolutely fascinated. Of course, they were all engineers. So the whole program got derailed, and the prime minister of that time, who was waiting in his summer house to offer a lunch for the president of China, got a little bit irritated because he waited and waited and waited and waited. But we couldn't get them away, because for them it was an historical eye-opener. And when he came back to China, he called on the leader of Beijing and other cities and started the process, which of course with the involvement of many others has led to this extraordinary geothermal cooperation between Iceland and China. Now taking one district, one city after another, closing down the coal power district heating system and replacing them with geothermal heating systems. Because China is extraordinarily rich in low and medium temperature areas and can indeed, as they look forward, use the geothermal urban heating system and cooling system on a scale that we have never seen before. And now the present leadership of China has moved this geothermal transformation to become the core question when they look at the urban future of China and the new cities they're going to build, as well as the present cities. And the question is, how are we going to heat and cool cities in the 21st and the 22nd century? And the answer, the obvious answer, everywhere in the world, because we now have the technology, we do it through geothermal transformation. I know for the technical army and the engineering scientists of the geothermal sector, it's a rather dull project, because most of the technology, if not all, already exist. But that is also, my dear friends, what we have to do. We have to promote these dull technologies that already exist. We can't be so fascinated by the deep drilling project, which is fascinating in itself, and other advances on the science and the technical field, that we forget and do not provide our effort into bringing the solutions and the messages which have already been proven and are now the core of making the urban areas on the planet livable. And in addition, as I mentioned to Rachel Kite yesterday, with the increasing emphasis on lifestyle transformation, where the young generation which lives in these cities wants healthy food, wants to enjoy the environment in their own apartment. We can also give them opportunities in their own homes and their own buildings to grow their own food, have their own garden, and in a way transform the lifestyle, which is also pleasant, as well as signaling how they care for the planet. So to me, to be a soldier in this army and following many of you in this journey, it's not only a fascinating endeavor, but it is also perhaps the most important global vision that we can jointly undertake. And I know these are strong words. But like President Hollande, who so movingly here on this stage, in this very hall, 6 weeks before the Paris negotiations, made this comprehensive case, why not only we should, but why we must come together in this transformation. It is now up to us to meet the call made in Paris by many, including the leaders, to bring the geothermal into the forefront of this transformation. And I think one of the inspiring lessons of Iceland, when we look at where we were when I was young and where we are today, is that if we can do it in such a short time, and so successfully, both with respect to the technology and the business advantages, we should, of course, be able to do it everywhere in the world. And that is why I think Professor Porter's analysis here was so compelling, because he gave us the framework from his wisdom and his research and the cases that have proved to be so successful in many other areas and in many other countries, that we no longer have to ask ourselves the question, is this sound economics? Is this good business practice? Because we can refer, in answering that question, to these extraordinary cases that he has presented and studied at the Harvard Business School. So if Iceland somehow, in its small way, can contribute to the success of this journey, I think I can say on behalf of the nation, we will be proud. Not only will we enjoy the economic benefits, but we will be proud, we will be honored to partner up with you in doing all of this. I sometimes say to people who come to the presidential residence, where we have the gifts that Reagan and Gorbachev brought to Iceland in 1986 when they came here for the famous summit at the height of the Cold War, when the frost was so deep and the hostility so strong that they couldn't meet in the United States or the Soviet Union, they had to meet in some other place. Reagan brought a statue of the American owl, the bird of wisdom which can see in darkness. And Gorbachev brought us a beautiful Russian clock, reminding us that time is ticking. But if you don't tell anybody else, the problem with Gorbachev clock was it actually never worked, but that's another story. But the combination of these two gifts, which they absolutely did not compare notes on before they came, is the message that with wisdom and with time, we can indeed succeed. And when they met here in Iceland, nobody believed that within 10 years, the Cold War would be over, that all of Europe would be free, that democracy and market economies would spread over the continent, that Africa and Asia and Latin America was finally rid of the superpower hostilities and the Cold War confrontations, and could start discussing and moving forward on their own in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Even the entire American media judged the summit a complete failure, when Reagan came back. But everybody now agrees that that meeting was the beginning of this extraordinary global transformation that we have all witnessed with the end of the Cold War. So I tell my visitors, especially young people, if you doubt that we can change the world, go upstairs and look at the hour and the clock, and then reflect on what happened after that summit. And we can do the same, my dear friends, in the field that has brought us together. Thank you very much.